Have you ever stopped to think about what would really happen if all the electricity on the planet suddenly disappeared? And I'm not talking about a simple blackout that lasts a few hours and then returns to normal. I'm talking about a complete and utter collapse of the entire global electrical infrastructure. Something that would have no quick or easy solution. Something that would completely change the way we live and understand modern civilization. This scenario, which seems straight out of an apocalyptic science fiction movie, is actually more possible than most people imagine, and scientists who study critical infrastructure and the resilience of energy systems lose sleep thinking about exactly this. What makes this topic even more frightening is that we are not talking about a remote possibility or something that could only happen in the distant future. We are talking about real vulnerabilities that exist right now, at this very moment, while you read these words on your electronic device that completely depends on this energy that we take for granted. The question is not whether our electrical grid is vulnerable. The question is how vulnerable it really is, and what would happen in the first minutes, the first hours, the first days, and the first weeks after a total system collapse. To fully understand the catastrophic magnitude of an electrical collapse, we first need to understand how utterly dependent our modern civilization has become on electricity in literally every aspect of daily life. When you wake up in the morning, the alarm clock that wakes you up runs on electricity. The light you turn on runs on electricity. The shower that heats your water depends on electric pumps to get the water to your apartment. The coffee maker that prepares your coffee needs energy. The elevator that takes you to the ground floor doesn't work without electricity. The traffic light that organizes traffic depends on electricity. The subway or train that many people use to get to work is completely electric. The computers in offices obviously need energy. Communication systems, including the internet and cell phones, depend on towers and servers that consume massive amounts of electricity. Hospitals need energy to keep patients alive in ICS and to operate essential medical equipment. Supermarkets need constant refrigeration to keep food fresh. Banks depend on electronic systems for all transactions. And even the cash you have in your pocket only has value because there is a digitized financial system that guarantees its value. And this system depends entirely on electricity. The list is literally endless, because there is practically no aspect of modern life that does not depend directly or indirectly on electricity functioning constantly and reliably. Now let's imagine the scenario of the collapse beginning to unfold, second by second. In the first few seconds after the collapse, the lights go out instantly everywhere. Computer screens go black. Cell phones that are charging stop charging but still function on battery power. Elevators stop wherever they are at that moment, and many people are trapped inside them. Traffic lights go out, causing instant traffic chaos. Electric trains and subways stop abruptly on the tracks. Medical equipment in hospitals that don't have emergency generators simply shuts down, putting lives at immediate risk. Ventilation systems in underground mines and tunnels stop working. Pumps that keep water circulating in nuclear power plant cooling systems stop working, initiating a dangerous countdown to a possible core meltdown. And millions of people around the world simultaneously experience that moment of confusion where you don't know exactly what's happening but realize that something is very wrong. In the first few minutes, people still think it's just a normal blackout and that the power will come back soon. Some companies turn on their emergency generators, which run for a few hours. Cell phones still work on battery power, but cell phone towers begin to fail one by one as their backup batteries run out. Traffic chaos increases exponentially because, without traffic lights and efficient communication, accidents begin to multiply. People trapped in elevators begin to panic, and the first lootings of stores begin in some of the more vulnerable areas where people quickly realize that there are no security systems working. In the first hours after the collapse, Daisy begins to deteriorate exponentially, and people start to realize that this is no ordinary blackout. Cell phones begin to run out of battery, and people completely lose the ability to communicate with family and friends, creating widespread panic and uncertainty. Hospitals that rely on generators begin to face problems because the generators were not designed to run indefinitely. And fuel begins to run out, with no possibility of replenishment since gas stations cannot pump fuel without electricity. Supermarkets begin to lose all refrigerated and frozen food, representing losses of billions in merchandise and eliminating essential food sources for the population. Drinking water systems begin to fail, because they rely on electric pumps to bring treated water to homes. And without running water, people cannot wash their hands, cook, or use toilets properly, quickly creating dangerous, unsanitary conditions. Banks obviously don't function without their electronic systems, so even if you have money in your account, you can't access it. And cash quickly loses value because there's no way to verify its authenticity without electronic security systems. Supply chains that provide cities with food and essential goods come to a complete standstill because they rely on computerized logistics systems and trucks that need fuel that can't be pumped without electricity. In the first few days after the collapse, society as we know it truly begins to crumble along with the electrical grid. The lack of potable water becomes critical, and people begin to despair, leading to violent conflicts over basic resources. Food in homes begins to run out, and without supermarkets functioning or supply chains operating, real famine begins to set in, especially in large cities that depend entirely on food brought in from elsewhere. Hospitals can no longer keep critically ill patients alive, and the mortality rate skyrockets, not only among those who were already ill, but also among people who suffer injuries from accidents or violence and cannot receive adequate treatment. Sewage begins to overflow because treatment systems do not function without power, creating serious risks of disease and epidemics. Temperatures inside homes become unbearable, depending on the season, with people dying of cold in winter or heat in summer without heating or air conditioning systems. Law and order begin to deteriorate completely because without communication, the police cannot coordinate effectively. And without functioning surveillance and alarm systems, crime increases dramatically. People begin to organize themselves into groups for mutual protection, and violence over resources becomes increasingly common and brutal. Governments completely lose the ability to coordinate responses because all communication and command systems are inoperative. In the first few weeks, what remains of modern civilization is completely unrecognizable. Large cities become death traps, where there is no food, no water, no security, and millions of people try to flee to rural areas, creating the largest mass migration in human history. Famine becomes widespread, and severe malnutrition especially affects children and the elderly, who die by the thousands. Diseases that were easily treatable become death sentences because there are no antibiotics available or ways to administer them properly. Epidemics of diseases transmitted through contaminated water spread rapidly, killing even more people. Without proper refrigeration and without knowledge of ancient food preservation techniques, people cannot effectively store food. The social structure completely fragments into tribes and local groups that violently defend their territories and resources. Money completely loses any value, and the global economic system collapses entirely, being replaced by direct barter of goods. Practical knowledge and skills become more valuable than any formal education, and people who know how to hunt, fish, grow food, build shelters, or purify water become the new leaders of surviving communities. But what could actually cause an electrical collapse of this magnitude? There are several frightening possibilities that keep infrastructure security experts awake at night. The first, and perhaps most discussed, is a solar storm of extreme magnitude, similar to the Carrington event of 1859, which was the largest geomagnetic storm ever recorded and occurred at a time when humanity had barely begun to use electricity. However, if a similar event happened today, it could literally fry transformers and sensitive electronic components in power grids around the world, causing damage that would take years to fully repair. The second possibility is a coordinated and sophisticated cyber attack against critical energy infrastructure, something that is no longer science fiction but a real threat recognized by all governments and security organizations, where hackers, sponsored by hostile states, or terrorist groups could simultaneously disable multiple critical points in the power grid, causing a cascading effect that would lead the entire system to collapse. The third possibility is an electromagnetic pulse attack, or EM, where a nuclear weapon detonated at high altitude could generate an electromagnetic pulse so powerful that it would instantly fry virtually all unprotected electronic devices within a radius of thousands of kilometers. Another, less discussed, but equally real, possibility is simply the aging and inadequacy of existing electrical infrastructure combined with increasing demand, where many power grids around the world operate at the limit of their capacity with equipment that should have been replaced decades ago, creating a situation where a cascading collapse could be triggered by a relatively minor fault that propagates rapidly through an already overloaded system. What makes this scenario even more terrifying is that very few real measures are being taken to prevent or prepare for this type of collapse. Power grids remain vulnerable. Governments lack adequate contingency plans for a prolonged collapse. The general population is completely unprepared and doesn't even realize how much it depends on fragile systems. And even experts who understand the problem can't convince politicians and decision-makers to invest the massive resources needed to truly protect and modernize critical infrastructure. The only real hope would be a coordinated global program of investment in more resilient power grids, decentralized backup systems, protection against electromagnetic pulses and solar storms, dramatic improvement in the cybersecurity of industrial control systems, and public education on emergency preparedness. But none of this is happening on the necessary scale, meaning we are all living under a constant threat of a collapse that would permanently change the course of human civilization and take decades to fully recover, if any full recovery is even possible after so much death and destruction. Now, I want to know your honest opinion on this. Do you think our society is truly prepared to face an electrical collapse? Or are we all living in an illusion of security that could be shattered at any moment? Leave your comment below because I really want to know what you think about this topic that practically no one discusses, but which could be the greatest threat humanity faces. Check if you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any videos. And don't forget to click on the video that's currently appearing on your screen to continue discovering more absolutely fascinating facts that will blow your mind and completely change the way you see the world around you.